and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hello, and welcome to the Author Roundup. I'm Jenny, your host for today. In this episode, we're joined by Theresa Chilcoat, founder of Inner Authority Company and a seasoned human resources strategist with over 15 years of experience in employee relations and leadership development. Her career began with day to day coaching and organizational support and has evolved into a mission to help individuals and organizations reclaim their power, peace, and happiness from within. Drawing on her extensive experience, Teresa has guided executives, managers, and employees through complex workplace challenges, including conflict resolution, culture transformation, and burnout recovery. Always with the goal of creating environments where people don't just endure, but excel. She's the author of Surviving the Toxic Workplace from an HR Insider: How to Reclaim Your Power, Peace, and Happiness, a book that helps readers recognize unhealthy workplace dynamics, own their inner authority, and pursue clarity and peace without sacrificing their career or losing themselves along the way. Join us as we discuss her book, her publishing journey, and the insights behind her work. Teresa, welcome to the Author Roundup.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm such an honor to be here.
And I'm so excited to talk to you about your book. Tell us about the moment that you realized that you just have to write Surviving the Toxic Workplace.
That's a great question. It came out of my own personal experience of being in HR and being in a toxic workplace. And normally you would go to HR, but
Mhm.
I was HR and I was the HR department. And I was being subjected to basically harassment and bullying in that I really had no resources. And I realized that there are other employees that are experiencing the same thing that I am, that either A, they don't trust HR, or B, they just don't have the resources to have somebody help them out. So
Mhm.
it was really out of the necessity for myself is how am I going to survive the situation when I don't have any external resources? So I tapped into what I know personally from HR and how I navigated HR to help others find a way through a path of feeling like they have some control over their lives when they're going through it.
Mhm. So it's like you experienced it. So you thought that,
Yes,
well, how about the others who are also going through the same thing I'm going through? Okay, so you originally intended to write this book for managers, right? But
correct.
however, your focus shifted to employees and personal
Yes.
empowerment. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I always been one of those HR people I wanted to be where leaders came to me as a resource, a guide to help them as a partnership collaborating. But when I realized that when you're in a toxic place and you feel like you're alone, there's nothing worse than feeling really stressed out and don't feel like you have anyone that you can talk to. Because a lot of times when someone's going through this as an employee, it can feel very isolating because a lot of times that's not everybody that's subjected to it. So it leads to even more isolation or depression, anxiety, stress. It's just a slew of things that happen when you're in that situation. And I wanted people to know you're not alone in that
Mhm.
I see and hear what you've been through, especially after all the investigations I've done. I've done thousands of them of people, claiming harassment or whatever in the workplace. And then to be on the other side of it was very eye-opening. And I can really empathize with somebody now once since I've been through it.
Yeah, so having HR background,
Hmm.
that gave you the best of both worlds. Like, so you can see both sides. How did your
Correct.
background in HR shape the way you see toxic workplaces differently
Yes.
from, just the average employee who
Yeah.
doesn't have any background in HR?
Well, working in HR is kind of working at the Wizard of Oz. I get to see behind the curtain and I can see who's pulling the levers and, doing all the things behind the scenes. So I see the executive and leadership team and what their true behaviors are. And a lot of employees don't realize there are a lot of leaders and executives that don't necessarily follow the code of conduct or, best practices or mission statement, value statement. Those are just words on a piece of paper to them. They have a different code that they follow. And when I come to them and say, hey, based on our employee handbook, this is how we should handle that situation, and they're willing to disregard that, then that's where there's a disconnect, and most employees aren't aware or exposed to that type of behavior.
hmm Okay, so let's go back to what you mentioned earlier about
Hmm.
experiencing that toxicity yourself. You
Yeah.
describe
Hmm.
in your book reaching a breaking point. Now, what specifically was, do you mind sharing, what specifically was happening in
Sure.
your life and work at that time?
So the group I was working with, I would call it the Mean Girls. It was a group of women, and they were all an executive team, and I was the only HR person on site. And I would literally call it bullying, that they would find things to come and accuse me of or insinuate I didn't know how to do my job. I didn't know what I was doing. And this all occurred like within a 3-month period that I walked into that job feeling very confident of my skills and my competencies. But after 3 months, I literally didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't understand what was happening. And I really started to question my ability to do my job and who I was. So it really got to a point where I realized that no matter how hard I tried to prove to these people that I do know what I'm talking about and I am competent and experienced, I'm not going to change their mind. So it was best that for my mental health, I actually just walked away. And I'm not a proponent for that, but sometimes, considering the circumstances, that's what you have to do. But in my book, what I really try to help people is be able to make a decision from a rash and calm mind instead of being stressed out and doing something irrational and then regretting it later. So, helping you formulate a plan. What am I going to do to help myself feel better about the situation? And what can I do to put steps in place to empower me to decide, do I want to stay or go? And what does that look like?
I'm sure that a lot of employees can relate to that. Now, many
Yeah.
people will wonder,
Mhm.
they would always wonder if the workplace is really toxic or if they are just
Yeah,
overreacting. It's not easy to actually admit that you
I
are
know.
in a toxic workplace. How do you help someone distinguish the
Yeah.
difference?
Well, first you have to remove the legal jargon because there's a legal, definition of toxic workplace, but then there is just the generalization, like I feel this place is toxic. And
Mhm.
my book is not about the legal part. I'm not focusing on the protected classes and all the laws and all that. That's mine is to help people recognize, is this toxic or dysfunction in the sense of, am I being micromanaged? Am I being excluded from communication? Is my job being, am I lack of autonomy that I can't do my job without someone interfering with my job? Am I being subjected to bullying or gossiping? So things that disrupt your everyday life in work to where when you leave work, that you are still thinking about it or you're dreading coming back to the office the next day because of something that's occurring on a daily basis.
Okay, I think that's a little bit clearer now. So if you start feeling that, then
Yeah.
there is a chance that you are in a toxic
Yes.
workplace. And in your book, Teresa, you also explain something about a toxic triangle. Why is it so
Yes.
important for understanding workplace dysfunction?
Well, what's interesting is when I did the research for the book, I found this article written, and it was written back in 2000, I think 17. So this is not something that's new, but I had never heard of it before. And what it helped me realize is the dynamics and the complexity of getting rid of a toxic workplace is very complex because there is basically the person that's causing, the manager that's causing the toxic workplace, but then you have the followers and the colluders, but then you also have to have a culture that lacks accountability. So all three of those items have to be in play for a toxic culture to survive. So even if you take the manager out of the equation, if you still have a lack of accountability in your culture and then you still have followers, that are willing to pick up where that other person left off and continue those behaviors. That's why it's very hard for a company to get rid of that behavior. It has to start at the top and everyone has to be held accountable to the same standard. But what I found is there's a lot of people that are excluded because they make a lot of money, they know somebody, they're related to somebody. So there's always these exclusions that create a pocket, and then that ends up spreading through the culture is, oh well, sales, they have a different culture than we do because they bring the money into the company. So that's why it's really hard. And I think it was important for people to realize, even from an HR standpoint, it's not just HR that can handle it. It has to be company wide, all employees, all leadership, and HR in partnership agreeing like this is not the culture that we want to have, and we hold everybody accountable to the same standard, regardless of what your job and what you bring to the table.
I see. So it has to be a concerted effort in order
Correct.
to make the change. However, one also powerful idea in your book is that toxicity is often normalized. Like, why can
Yes.
employees and organizations just accept it?
It's human nature to want to be part a group. I mean, if you think about when we were hunters and gatherers, if you literally were tossed out of the group, that was a death sentence. Like if
Mhm.
you were not allowed to, like that was death because as a group, you hunted together, you slept together. That was protection. And that's ingrained in our human nature is to be accepted and be part of something. So when you see something that you don't agree with, it's really hard to stand up and, put yourself exposed. Like, are they going to be, am I going to be the next victim?
Mhm.
They going to make fun of me? Is anyone going to take me seriously? Is this going to be something that they're going to be willing to address? So there's a lot online to stick your neck out. And that's like a lot, like with whistleblowers, like a lot of the same thing is it worth it to say something when it might not necessarily be addressed or I end up being retaliated against?
Mhm. Yeah, who wouldn't want to be part of a group like you've said? And
Yeah,
why, it will always cross your mind, why would I risk my
exactly.
career for someone just to, just to help him out or something? Okay, that's kind of
Yeah. And then a lot of times there are followers because they are getting something out of it. Sometimes it's favoritism, sometimes
mm,
they agree with the behavior. And
hmm.
then you have other people that follow just absolutely out of sheer survival. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to fly under the radar. I'm going to do my job, keep my head down. I don't want anything to do with this. I see it, but I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to expose myself and say, hey, it's not fair that, you're picking on so and so, or I see that they're being targeted, but I don't want to be targeted myself. So it's literally survival. It's just a form of mental survival. And it's just human nature is like, am I willing to be ostracized from the
Yeah.
group?
So being just a silent witness in all of these actually makes you part of the toxicity.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes,
Oh,
that's why it's so complex.
yeah.
It's anytime you have people involved, it's complex.
Okay, so another surprising detail that you mentioned in the book, I'm sure this will surprise a lot of people, is about workplace trauma and even PTSD.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people
Yes.
know this yet, but how serious can the impact really be?
Well, obviously on industry, like, EMTs, ER physicians and nurses and some of the professions, they're going to be a lot higher PTSD. But everyday people, like if you're just going to a regular office, it can be, if it's insidious enough and you're subjected to certain trauma, it can feel like you have PTSD. And I did not realize that was something that could possibly happen until I did the research. And I experienced that after I left the company I was at, is if I was to go towards that road that I would turn, I would make a left to go to that office. I literally would get physically sick to my stomach thinking that I would have to go back there. So PTSD is after you leave the situation, you're having a visceral experience or response to the trauma that you had, even though you're not being subjected to it anymore.
Yeah.
So that can be stomach, headache, literally nauseous, just physical response to the trauma that you've been through.
Yeah. A lot of people take that for granted without even realizing that that's already the impact of what they had to go through in that.
Exactly.
I see. So you also talk about self-awareness.
Yes.
Now, what does self-awareness look like for someone who's completely stuck and overwhelmed?
That's a really good question because when I realized what was going on, I realized that my self awareness, because you're so stressed out, you are in the fight or flight mode. You are literally no self awareness. Self awareness comes with the prefrontal cortex. That's the rational decision making part of the mind. But when we are stressed out, that part of our brain shuts down completely. So it's finding a way to become calm enough to be aware of what's happening to you and recognizing the signs like what's happening to my body, how am I responding to what's happening to me. So it's a way to find a way to step back and stop reacting to what's happening and find a way to be more proactive in the situation, to start taking control and owning your power in the situation.
Mhm. So would you say that's the first step into getting out of?
100%. You have to have the self awareness. Like you can't have self control or
Mhm.
make any decisions until you are aware of what is happening to yourself physically and mentally in that role. And what part am I playing in this, myself externally and internally, that awareness to be able to make decisions.
Mhm. Okay, so you mentioned self-control already, and you describe it as a superpower. What does self-control look like in a practice
Yeah.
during a difficult work situation?
Yeah. If you are able to maintain your self control and be like an observer and not react to a situation and still have a calm and peaceful mind, that's a superpower because you're not giving over your power. Because when you do allow yourself to become consumed with what is happening, you're giving up your power. So that's why it's a superpower, is that you're literally taking back your own power and you have that peace of mind no matter what is going on in your world around you, that
Mhm.
you still have your power and you have peace regardless of what's happening around you.
Mhm. Yeah, however, not a lot of us are able to maintain that self-control
It
and
is,
we get
oh, believe me, it's
affected.
hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all human and there are going to be days when things don't go well. I mean, even after writing a book, I still have those days, but it
Mhm.
also is being aware as, am I tired? Am I hungry?
Mhm.
When was the last time I drank water? Have I drank too much caffeine? These are things that once you become more aware of it, then it's just becomes a repetition of checking in with yourself. And then every day, I did better today than I did yesterday. And it's just baby steps. It's not a sprint, it's literally a marathon, and you take it one day at a time.
Right. So some of the things that you mentioned, well, I think we can relate that to self-care, right? Like thinking like, am I
Yes.
okay? Am I sleeping well and all that? So many high achievers would struggle with self-care. Why is it so
Yes.
hard for people to prioritize themselves?
100%. I would call myself a type A person before I wrote this book. I called myself a rock star. I would take on any responsibility. I would do, hey, you need help? Okay, yeah, I don't care if I'm already overwhelmed. I
Mhm.
That was part of my worth. And I think a lot of high achievers, they value themselves based on how much they take on for responsibility. And you don't take care of yourself when you're willing to take on more. You don't have any boundaries. You're willing to basically sacrifice yourself for the sake of others. So it's very, very hard to pull back and realize less can be more. Like you don't have to go 100 miles an hour and allow yourself space to rest and just be. And it can be very hard to experience calm and not be going 100 miles an hour 24/7.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of employees can relate to that, especially when you're new in the job and you're just trying to
Yes.
prove yourself. Yeah, so just
Yes.
try to take on and prove to everyone that you can actually do it, right? Yeah, so remember not to go down that path.
Yeah. Well, that's what's one thing that's great. I do appreciate with the younger generations that they really are advocating. I want work-life balance. I am not doing what you guys did. I am not working 70 hours a week. I'm not working all weekend. I'm not working these crazy hours. I want to have a life. And they will leave if they realize that you're going to want something that doesn't align with what they want.
Correct. And in your book, Teresa, you also touch on self acceptance. Now, it can
Hmm.
feel a little uncomfortable. What makes this step so challenging, and why is it necessary?
Yeah. Well, when you become self-aware, there's things you might not like. So you have to accept yourself for who you are and where I am today. But through self-awareness is that's how you can make change. And if you're not willing to recognize, hey, I don't like this about myself, I really want to change that. But it's giving yourself grace when you do realize that, I'm willing to make a change. But they are hand in hand. You have to have self-awareness, but the self-acceptance to realize this is who I am today, but tomorrow I can show up different. I don't have to continue that behavior or be that person. I can do things to change who I am.
hmm And in your book, you also have a chapter dedicated to self empowerment, right? So
Yep.
it's very important that you talked about that as well. What does true self empowerment look like for someone who is still working in a toxic environment?
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about is Stephen Covey's Seven Habits Highly Successful People or Highly Effective People is he talks about the circle of concern versus a circle of influence.
hmm
And empowerment comes from focusing on the things that you do have control of. Because realistically, 90% of what happens to us, we have absolutely no control over. And we allow ourselves to get consumed with the circle of concern. Those are all the things that no matter how much we ruminate on them, we can't change them. But if you spend your time in your circle of influence working on what you actually can control, that's when you feel more empowered because you're seeing your time and energy being compounded on things that you can control. And that could be as simple as how you react. So, your manager, you know, he comes in the morning and he doesn't talk to you, and you've been allowing it to get to you for how long? Instead, tomorrow, like I'm not going to let it bother me anymore. That's him. It's not me. I'm not going to let it get to me. I'm going to focus on me. That's him, not my problem. So it's simple as stuff as that. That's where empowerment comes from because you're recognizing what you're allowing your energy to go towards things that are frivolous or you have absolutely no control over. Like you have no control over the way Sally sends an email. That's not any of your concern. Your
hmm
concern is respond back to her nicely and move on and not worry about it.
Right. So you have control over how you will
Yes.
feel, how
Yes.
you will manage
And that's where
this
self
time.
empowerment comes from because you're empowering yourself and how you respond.
Mhm. So, my next question might be a little bit related to that, but for someone who feels drained or stuck in their job right now,
Hmm.
what's one small concrete step that they can take today to start reclaiming their power?
That's probably the hardest thing, especially because I've been there when you feel like you're stuck, like I have no options. There are
Mhm.
always options. And number one is the option of deciding how do you want to show up? How do you want to be seen for yourself? Regardless of whatever's happening around you, what will make you happy right now in this moment? Would it just be, to go on a walk outside? Would it be to start looking at another job? Or maybe it's a hobby I want to take up that I can do outside of work, something I can look forward to at the end of the day instead of worrying about what's happening around me. Because as much as our brain will tell us that we have no options, we really do. It's just getting quiet enough to sit and think through, hey, what can I do right now that will help me feel like I am making forward progress and I'm not stuck?
Yeah. Okay, so for I know we talked about how to manage being in a toxic workplace or how to get out of a toxic
Yeah.
workplace. Um, let's think about not being in the toxic workplace in the first place. Are there some warning signs that people should look for during the hiring process so that they can avoid toxic
Yeah.
workplaces?
That's funny because I actually joke about it in the book is because that's one of the hardest things. Like I would love to be able to ask, like on a scale of 1 to 10, one being Zen, 10 being the Star Spangled Banner of crazy, what would you rank your team as? I would love to be able to answer, have that, but you're not going to get that. And that's where I would look at Glassdoor, Indeed reviews of the company. Yes, you'll have some crazy people that will be outlandish, But if there's a common theme that you're seeing, then that is truly what the culture's like. So if you're seeing a lot of the same things about certain managers or the culture itself, then there is a moment of truth in there. The other thing too, I would reach out to people on LinkedIn that are currently working at the company and ask them, hey, what do you truly think about this company? And just do your research on companies that you want to work for and see, on their website, what do they have posted? What are they posting on social media? And then ask some employees, what their opinion is. Because honestly, you're not going to find the true company culture and how people are during an interview. It's like
Mhm.
going on a date. Of course, people should be on their best behavior. But
Mhm.
when you get hired, it's like when you get married, then all of a sudden people start acting differently. So when you go on a date, you should be on your best behavior.
Yeah, and you're gonna end up saying, "This is not what I signed up for."
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's good to do your homework. Um,
Yes.
yes, and start talking to real people who are
Yes,
in
that
that
are working
organization.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
and just reach out to them because most people would be willing to, give their opinion on if they enjoy working there or not.
yeah, that's very important. Now, Teresa, we've talked a lot about your book. I would also want to talk about your journey as an author.
Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced while writing this book?
Actually finding the time because I was working full time. I always felt compelled to do it. Like it was never like I don't want to do it. I think it was very cathartic for what I'd gone through. So I really wanted to get it on paper and get it out there so I could help just even if I could just help one person through this process to feel like you're not alone in that you have resources and I wanted to get that out there. But the
Mhm.
other challenge, I guess, was putting together like the structure of it and outlining, chapters because I had done research for so long. It's like, okay, you need to start writing. Just start
Mhm.
writing.
Yes.
So that's one of the challenges is formulating what you want it to look like and then, how long should it be and, how is less more or should I put more in here? So kind of the little nuances.
Hmm. Yes, I can just imagine it must be difficult having all of these ideas in your head and putting it down in paper. Like,
Exactly.
where do I start? Okay. So, with all of those challenges that you mentioned,
hmm
did writing this book change you personally in any way?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, it was very cathartic, but it also gave me a platform to do speeches for other HR professionals and employees to help them see and know that they're not alone. It's also helped me create a platform to do workshops for leadership to help them recognize when employees are disconnecting or there's issues within a department. Maybe there's a manager that's struggling, so they can work on self-awareness.
Mhm. How about for those who would want to start writing? What advice would you
Mhm.
give to them if they feel that they have a story to tell,
Yeah.
but just like you, they're having a hard time starting it?
Yeah, I would highly suggest finding a writing group or a program that gives you the structure. I was actually fortunate enough that I had a program that I went through that helped me outline the book and the chapters, which really helped me figure out how I wanted to outline the book itself and what content to put in each chapter. I think that's the biggest challenge why people maybe don't launch their writing is they don't even know where to start. So if you have some program that gives you some structure, it's extremely helpful to be able to outline what you're going to write and then what you're going to put in the chapters. So it's kind of like a puzzle piece. Putting together a puzzle, you put the pieces in and then they come together as you write.
That is very helpful because not everyone who has these ideas in their mind know how to write, right? Or, have
Exactly.
formal training in how
Yeah.
to write. Yeah.
And
Okay.
the other
So,
thing I would say about writing, which I think there's a misnomer that whatever comes out of your head first is supposed to be perfect. And it's not. I think of it as doing a painting is
mhm,
many, many layers. Like I see it as just get it out on paper. It doesn't matter what it sounds like, what it looks like. Just get out your thoughts and then go back and then be able to go and articulate them. I think
mhm.
that's where I have so many people are like, well, I don't know what to say. And I said, you just start writing. You can't think it's going to be the first thing that comes out. It's like when you train for a marathon, you're not going to run, 4.6 miles, your fastest when you first start. You got to work your way up to it. And it's the same thing with writing. It's a muscle you develop, but it's not going to come out perfect, so don't expect it to come out perfect.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can always, go back and
Yes.
rewrite, edit it, and
Yep.
make changes. Okay. And so, Teresa, what's next for you? Are there like future books, coaching programs, or resources in development?
Definitely coaching leadership. And then a workshop that I'm working on is called Attention to is Retention to help leadership focus on, employees being happy. So I kind of flipped it over instead of focusing just on, empowering employees to be happy, but also helping managers be the self-awareness to look and see when are people disconnecting. Because there's four different signs people disconnecting before they actually turn in their resignation. So the steps that I have there really help managers realize too, because I don't think anybody sets out to be create a toxic environment. I think it's just a lack of training and
Mhm.
a lack of self-awareness that ends
That's
up
true.
creating these environments. A lot of managers don't see how they show up. They don't realize, how you walk through the door says a lot, the nonverbal
Mhm.
and how you're perceiving yourself or others. It makes a big difference as a manager if you're aware or not.
So those are very interesting programs that you have. Before we close, where can
Mhm.
listeners connect with you online? And where can they get, of
Sure.
course, a
Yeah,
copy of
I'm
your book?
on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram and TikTok. And my handles on all of them is T Chilcoat. So T is in Tom, Chilcoat. And also, if they want to get if listeners want to get a sample of my book, they can text POWER to 33777 and they can get a sample, the first two chapters of my book.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. So that concludes our conversation. Teresa, thank you for joining us and sharing your
Thank you so
insights
much, Jenny. It's
on
been a pleasure.
navigating workplace challenges and reclaiming personal well being. It has been deeply insightful and I'm sure truly valuable for everyone tuned in. Now, surviving the toxic workplace from an HR insider, How to Reclaim Your Power, Peace, and Happiness by Theresa Chilcoat. It's available in softcover, hardcover, and ebook formats. And I heard that there's an audiobook coming soon. Is that right?
Yes, we're working on the audio.
So you can find that on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, the Balboa Press online bookstore, and other major resellers. So grab a copy now. Thank you for tuning in to the Author
Thank you.
Roundup. I'm Jenny, and I'll see you in the next episode.